Hello, everybody. I think I'm live now. Oh, there I am. Cool. So, haven't done one of these really in a while, but I felt like it was more than necessary given the abysmal performance that we just saw Michigan State put on against Rutgers, who's probably not only the worst football team that we've seen in the Big Ten since they've been in the Big Ten, but they might be the worst football team in the entire country in that time period. And obviously they beat Michigan State today, a Michigan State team that people didn't think was going to be very good, but should absolutely not have lost to Rutgers. So let's get into it a little bit. I want to talk first and foremost, mostly about the quarterbacks. Right, we saw a lot of Rocky Lombardi today, and if you just looked at the box score, you would think Rocky Lombardi played fantastic. He was 31 of 44 for 300 and something yards, three touchdowns, and two interceptions. The problem, and Rocky Lombardi wasn't the biggest problem with the game. Michigan State turned the ball over 7 times and had five fumbles that they lost, which far and away the number one problem. But as far as Rocky Lombardi goes, before we get into he played so well, just go look at it, the stats back it up, etc., etc. He was scared to throw the ball down the field, or it's just that the coaches didn't trust him to throw the ball down the field, which is such a huge issue to have, obviously, as a quarterback. So if you look at all of his yards, a lot of that was on, like screen passes, right? Very short throws. He had the 50-yard touchdown pass to Jaden Reed, who was the the dropper of two of those fumbles that we talked about earlier. But on that play, it was 4th and 1. Rocky Lombardi threw it behind the first down line, so less than a yard. And then Jaden Reed shook one defender and then went off for 50 yards. That counts as a 50-yard touchdown for Rocky Lombardi, but he didn't really do anything except just give the ball to Jaden Reed and then let him go and score in space, which it's fine, right? Because there are plays that are designed like that. But when you keep having those plays, when you keep having to rely on the screens, that's how you can't trust your quarterback. So you can even get days like today, right? 31 to 44. That's pretty close to 75% completion percentage. Again, 320 yards and three touchdowns. So that all looks nice. But the first interception was a super backbreaker in the sense that he missed Jalen Naylor on a play before where they miscommunicated. He wanted Naylor, it looked like, to either run out route or come back. Naylor went deep, and then the ball just kind of got thrown out of bounds. And then on the interception, the same type of thing, except if you throw it deep, that's a touchdown because Naylor had his defender beat, and there was no safety help over the top. So if you put a good ball deep, boom, Naylor's there, and then he scores a touchdown. Is it a different game? Maybe, maybe not. Instead, what happens is Rocky reads it as Naylor's, gonna do the comeback. He doesn't. The defender does. The defender picks it off, and then that's a drive that Rutgers ends up scoring a touchdown on. So that's a 14-point swing right there, right there. So before anybody gets into the comments about how well that Rocky Lombardi played, don't because he didn't play well. We see it in the comments here. Boom, the first one. MSU was awful. 7 turnovers, and why wouldn't you change QBs? Exactly. I think they should change QBs. There is a point in the game, though, where, when you want to win and say you're going in the fourth quarter, and I think they were down 8 heading into the fourth quarter. Yeah, they were down 8, and Rutgers was driving, and eventually they made it like an 11-point game at that point. But there's kind of a fine line between when you can and can't change QBs, right? Because if you're trying to win the game, you don't want to just throw in a completely like cold turkey QB in there at the start of the fourth quarter or with 2 drives left or something like that. It's a mistake, I think. Was it when MSU lost to Notre Dame back in 2013? D'Antonio did that with Andrew Maxwell, where he threw him back in there, when he's had absolutely no rhythm at all, and then it ended up costing them that game. But yeah, Rocky threw checkdowns all day, and then just the ball security issues. I mean, it's crazy enough to fumble. They ended up fumbling, I think, a total of 7 times, and they recovered. They lost 5 of them, and so I believe they recovered 2. It's crazy just to lose 5 fumbles, regardless. or to drop the ball 5 times, I should say, but to lose, but to lose 5 fumbles is borderline insane and nothing that we've seen before. I saw a stat before Rocky threw that final interception, which pushed MSU to 7 turnovers. Their 6 turnovers were the most that they've had since they played Notre Dame in 2004. So you're talking about 16 years, about what, like 12 football games a year. So yeah, so that's plus bowl games. You're probably looking at about like 180 games of Michigan State football that you have not had 6 turnovers in. And then today you obviously turned the ball over 7 times to, again, not a team that's good. You're not playing Ohio State. You're not playing Clemson. You're not playing some team with like this really fierce defense. You're playing Rutgers, right? You're still probably a better football team than Rutgers, but it doesn't matter, right? You could have the NFL Pro Bowl rosters, but if you turn the ball over 7 times, you're going to lose regardless. So yeah, very very bad start to the Mel Tucker era. Not sure MSU wins the game this year, man. I don't know. I was more optimistic than like because you saw a lot of like, oh, they're gonna go 2-6 this year. I was a little bit more optimistic than that. Obviously, a win everybody was counting was going to be against Rutgers week 1. I think they got to get a game in there just because there's some still like piss poor teams in the Big Ten. You still got teams like Northwestern who are on the schedule. Maryland's on the schedule. Indiana's on the schedule, and I don't think Indiana's any good. Although I know they're getting a little bit of hype, and not that we're any good either. But you got to think if you don't turn the ball over, 7 times in a game, right? There's going to be one of those games against Northwestern where they only turned it over once, and then they ended up, like pulling out a win over there or something. But yeah, it's not going to be a good season. And today, I don't know what was happening because you had the 4 fumbles just like on regular offense, right? I think two were sack fumbles, um, of Lombardi getting hit, stripped and losing the ball. Obviously, Jaden Reed had the 2, and then Jalen Naylor had the muff. So it was it was is insane. Like I can't imagine. I actually kind of feel bad for them because I can't imagine what the next week of practice is going to look like. With all the ball security drills they're going to have to do. You have to sleep with the football, I'm pretty sure. Mel Tucker should be considered for the next Lions head coach. Well, maybe if they just switched him and Patricia. Tucker picked up where Coach D left off. Yeah, so this game, like obviously you had the bad turnovers, and maybe I'm still just more optimistic at this point. I don't really see it as an indictment on Mel Tucker himself. I didn't like the play calling though. So you have your offensive coordinator James Johnson. MSU ran a lot of dives on first downs, and the biggest problem that I have, and this would go back up to Mel Tucker, is when they were going for it on fourth downs. Number one, I love being aggressive on fourth down and going for it. But two, it was one of their first drives. It might have been the first drive oh no, the first drive was a fumble. I think regardless, one of the first drives they had it at 4th and 3, and they ran a draw play on fourth down, and obviously you didn't get it because running a draw play just isn't something you do. So you have to do, imagine if it's like 1st through 3rd down, that's probably something that your offensive coordinator is calling, and then on 4th down, you would think you'd have to at least get the clearance. Like, hey, coach, we're thinking about running a draw. And then at that point, if you're Mel Tucker, you got to say, absolutely not. We're going to do something. Again, I don't like Rocky Lombardi. We just kind of went through it. But the one thing that he can do, right, is he can move around a little bit. So if you're getting in those 4th and short situations, why wouldn't you put him in a position to where he can move, right? He can make the option to throw a short pass and move the chains, or he can pick it up with his legs if he needs it. And instead, you're running draws, and obviously bringing the defense in with the garbage offensive line, and our running backs were horrible today. Jordan Simmons started out hot, the true freshman, and you thought there might be something there, and throughout his career there still could be, but he definitely slowed down the rest of the game. I think their running backs missed a couple holes that they could have hit, but overall, as a team, they averaged just 1.6 yards a carry, and for God knows why reason, Connor Hayward got 7 rushing attempts, and he was involved in the passing game a lot as well. And Connor Hayward is not not a guy I like on this team. And he was actually in the transfer portal, and then he decided to come back, probably to the detriment of MSU because he didn't play well today. Elijah Collins certainly didn't play well today. He had 8 carries for -1 yard. Um, I'm sorry, 9 carries for 3 yards. So he must have had one at the end. That was okay. So that was another thing too. Going like back to the play calling. I know I'm kind of all over the place, and I kind of apologize, but kind of not, just because there's a lot of stuff rolling around. We just lost to Rutgers, the worst loss I can remember as a Michigan State fan. And usually, when you talk about worst loss, you talk about something that has meaning, right, or significance, like the 2011 Big Ten championship game. Maybe the playoff loss to Alabama. When I talk about like worst loss, I mean it in the sense of like, damn man, we are a bad football team. So for me, this loss to Rutgers superseded the 2009 loss to Central, because at the time I was like, there's no way we can lose to Central Michigan. We're in the same state. We're obviously a way bigger school, and we should have a way better football team. And I remember losing that game and just being like, wow, this is a dark place to be in. And then today, I think that Rutgers loss supersedes that dark place loss, if you will, that happened to Central. More obviously more than a decade ago. But back to one of the other play calls that really bothered me, and it didn't matter because the game was over at this point. But Michigan State was down near their goal line. It was 38-20, so it's before they scored their final touchdown. Again, garbage time because there was like less than 2 minutes left. But it's third down. You would think as a team you're still at least trying to win and you're trying to score as fast as you can. And they ran the ball to obviously kept the clock moving. And I think the next play they scored on a pass. But like, why on God's earth are you going to run the ball right there? At least give off the perception that you're trying to win. So how many times do we need to get stopped on fourth down before we just kick a field goal? That was another thing that's going to get questioned. Is Michigan State was down 28-20. They could have kicked a field goal and gone down 28-23 with some of the momentum in their favor. They decided to go for it. Again, another bad call. Another run that they ended up getting stuffed on. Again, not letting Rocky Lombardi do the one thing that he could possibly do for you and pick it up with his legs. I didn't mind the call. I liked being aggressive, and I felt we're a better team than Rutgers. And if you feel like you're a better team, go try and impose your will. It just didn't work there. But I certainly don't, mind anybody saying, "Hey, take the points there," and then you kind of got them on the ropes. Maybe they feel a little bit more pressure, and they make a couple more mistakes because they made their fair share of mistakes too. They had 3 turnovers, right? They had the interception, which should have been a pick six, legal blindside block call that was pretty iffy, took those points off the board, and Michigan State ended up only scoring a field goal on that drive after some penalties on, once they got back on offense. So instead of 7 there, you only got 3. And then, Rutgers fumbled twice too. I think they fumbled once on a punt. They muffed a punt like we did. And then I think there's a sack fumble in there as well. So it's not like, Rutgers played a perfect game. But again, they had 3 turnovers, and we had 4 more than that. And, 3 more than that when it really mattered. The last turnover is just kind of like, oh, ha ha, it made it 7 instead of 6. But there were 6 that really mattered in the course of the game. And then the 7th is, you're just trying to throw the ball in the air at the end of the game and get there. But, I mean, at the end of the day, again, 7-7. It's going to be relentlessly garbage. That's funny, playing off Mel Tucker's relentless motto that they have. See you in Ann Arbor. Yeah, that's not a game I'm looking forward to at all. Now it's Michigan week, and you saw how bad they looked against Rutgers. Even if they don't turn the ball over, you can't imagine the game's going to go any better against Michigan next week. And it'll just be another year where, Michigan really takes it, takes it to MSU like they have. The last 2 years really hasn't been close. They won, 21-7 and 44-10. So it really hasn't been, it has not been close, and I don't expect this year to be close. And I think Harbaugh is going to, take delight in beating down on Michigan State. Regardless what happens tonight, right? Because if Michigan beats Minnesota, then the team gets a pretty big boost. Minnesota's a good team in the Big Ten, and then Michigan, okay, hey, we started our season on the right track. And now we can go down and we can pound our rival. And if they lose tonight, and then next week's just going to be a hell of a pick me up for them, and they're going to come out even madder. Albert says, "Nice to see you. Nice to see you too, Albert. I wanted to do some of these for the Lions. It just hasn't worked out like that." David said, "Really, Tucker looked in over his head. Excuse me, that's my fault. I just couldn't read it. He hired the coaches. Better show some growth over the season, or he won't prove that he is the man for the job." That is, again, that is the one thing. Just bringing it back to the offensive coordinator Jay Johnson, is he brought Jay Johnson from Colorado, and Colorado's offense was horrible last year. So I didn't like I liked most of the coaching hires that he did. There are things I could look at and say I can see why I did that. I can see why I did that. The one I questioned even in real time was Jay Johnson, because that didn't seem to make sense to me. And then looking at the game plan today, it didn't really seem to make sense at all. The thing that I think we can hope for is, and I mean, you don't want to, because that offensive line is so bad. We want to change quarterbacks, like we as fans do. I don't know what in the hell the staff thinks, but like you bring him in against a good front seven that Michigan has, and now it's a kid that you're really setting up for failure. And not that any kid you're going to bring in is going to help you win next week, but generally you would want to start somebody in a game against Rutgers or Northwestern or Maryland or one of sort of these lesser teams in the Big Ten, so that they're just not always under pressure. They're not always getting pounded. So now if you throw a guy like Theodore or Peyton Thorne in against Michigan, like you are not doing Thorne or Day any favors at all. So we might have to suffer through a week of Lombardi, another week of Lombardi, really just for that reason, because I don't know that the staff you know, wants to throw in, even if they want to change quarterbacks. I don't know that they want to do it next week against what they'll be facing. Don says, "What will the point spread be next week? minus 17." That seems pretty generous to Michigan State. It really depends, obviously, what happens tonight. If Michigan goes out and gets pounded, I think you can see maybe like a 14 or a 17 spread. Either way, I would smash Michigan all day. Um, but I think you can see it creep up to like 20, 21, especially if Michigan looks good tonight. If Michigan gets a win against Minnesota, I wouldn't see any reason for and it's in Ann Arbor. I don't know how much the point spreads are taking into account, quote unquote home field advantage now. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan was, 3 touchdown favorites at all. But that's kind of what we had, on this Michigan State Rutgers game. Again, there are really no signs of any positives at all, right? The one guy that you could look at and say, oh, he had a great game. Look at it. 11 catches, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Jaden Reed, but he also had 2 killer fumbles. And I don't care how many yards or really how many touchdowns you have. Like, you had his one fumble was Michigan State's, I think, for the first offensive play of the game, was when Rocky Lombardi threw it to him. He caught it. It looked like he had a first down. Yeah, he definitely had a first down. And then he fumbled it. Obviously, Rutgers gets the ball back after just going up 7-0. And they ended up, no, yeah, they kicked a field goal right there, didn't they? So, they were up 10-0. And then, obviously we had the strip fumble the next play, I think. And then you had the one near our end zone, where again, if you don't fumble, that's 3 points right there. Like, there were so many points that Michigan State left on the board because of all their turnovers. We talked about the Rocky Lombardi interception earlier, and how if he reads it correctly and he hits Jalen Naylor, that's a touchdown all day. And even just some more of those fumbles, that Jaden Reed fumble, right deep in Rutgers territory, when Michigan State was down there, and then he just gets the ball ripped from him, because they had some drives going, especially in the first half, and the turnovers obviously just killed them. They had four turnovers in the first half, and then their first possession of the third quarter, they fumbled it as well. I think it was their first 9 possessions. They didn't punt it once, but they only had 13 points because of all the turnovers. And throughout the entire game, Rutgers' starting field position was starting on their own 44-yard line, which meant that on average they only had to go 56 yards, basically half a field, to get into the end zone. And again, I don't think Rutgers is any good. I'm assuming none of you guys think Rutgers is any good because they aren't. But if they're literally only playing with half of a field, they're going to beat you. And you obviously saw that today, where they ended up beat Michigan State by double digits, and really 38-27. It wasn't really that close. It probably should have been 38-20. But there are things that you could point to if you're a Michigan State fan, and I wouldn't because you lost to Rutgers, and that's bad enough. But there are plays you can point to that took points off the board and directly correlated into Rutgers points, where you're like, oh, this, and this, and maybe it's a different ball game. Maybe it is, but you can play the if, ands, and buts with any games before, in football, in sports in general. And losing to Rutgers is certainly not a game you want to play that after. There should be no excuses when you lose to Rutgers, and I really don't want to hear any. And I hope I don't, but I'm sure through whatever type of medium you guys choose to inhale your content, you'll eventually see some excuses. And don't let them get away with it, because this is terrible. Against the worst, oh my God, we're bad loss that I've seen since they lost to Central Michigan in 2009. And to me, this one supersedes that. Because again, Rutgers is they're like the worst program in the entire country, not just the Big Ten, the entire country. They're a really, really bad program and team, and they beat you by 11 points. And a lot of the turnovers were probably unforced, but they forced a couple of those turnovers too, which makes it even more embarrassing than if you just muffed a couple punts. But it's them actually punching the ball out, and then you not being able to reciprocate that. Yeah, pride comes before the fall. Absolutely. And again, man, all off season, what you heard about, just kind of what you heard preached from Michigan State was culture change, relentless, the ball security. And it's things that every coach is going to tell their team. You obviously want to hold on to the football. And there's probably a lot of egg on the face, at least after this game, because that is not at all what Michigan State heard about. They had a hell of a lot of penalties too. It seemed like at least early in the game, any big play that they had was called back due to penalties. Let me see if I can see the penalty statistics here. Excuse me. Team stats. There we go. I know at one point they were at 5 penalties for 62 yards, and I'm sure they had a couple more. Because, again, after they had the pick six called back because of a penalty, I think they had a false start penalty and maybe another holding penalty because they got into a point where it was 2nd and 26. And then they were also at 3rd and 22 after a 4-yard pass. Again, with the play calling. A 4-yard pass, and it's 2nd and 26, and you're trying to get points. And even at the end of the first half, when they could have potentially scored, and they throw a swing pass, and they're probably it'd be a 55-yard field goal from that point, I think. And they just throw a swing pass to Connor Hayward instead of trying to push the ball downfield and not even score a touchdown there, even though that's what you want, right? Just even trying to put yourself in better field goal position, and that's not something that they did. So the play calling, again, is something that really, really boggled my mind. It seemed like there were a lot of screen passes. I don't know if that's just the scheme they want to run, or if it's because they don't trust any of their quarterbacks, or at least Rocky Lombardi, because that's who's behind center today, to throw the ball 20 yards downfield, because I think he only did it twice. And it's probably 3 times. So one time he overthrew Jalen Naylor when he was wide open. The other time it was a completion when the game was kind of out of hand already. And then I think the third time was that final interception right at the end of the game. But other than that, it was lots of dinks and dunks. And you even saw dinks and dunks on their last possession when they were trying to score quickly. And that's just not what you're going to be able to do. But back to the penalties. Yeah, 7 penalties for 62 yards. Well, I guess Rutgers had 9 for 66 too. So kind of even there. But again, you don't want 7 penalties in a game ever. Obviously, 7 turnovers, 5 fumbles lost, 2 interceptions thrown. So overall, a horrible game. Again, the worst possible start for Mel Tucker, for Michigan State, for anybody, right? For Rocky Lombardi to start the season, it certainly wasn't the vote of confidence that I'm sure he would like to have from Michigan State, because when you play Rutgers, it should be a week, especially like if it's your opening week, it should be a week that you come out feeling good about yourself, right? Because probably your quarterback played well. You guys probably won. You probably forced a couple turnovers. So you can come out and peacock a little bit because you got, like a cupcake win. And today, all of that backfired on Michigan State. And no, now Rutgers gets the peacock, and Rutgers gets the cupcake win here. But that's what we have. If you guys do, want to hear more of this, this video will be uploaded on YouTube. So if you missed any of it, you can catch it over there at the Sports Carnage Podcast YouTube, and then catch our Sports Carnage podcast. It's up on Detroit Sports Nation most weeks. Not this week, not yet. I still have to upload it, but it's up on Podbean and iTunes as well. So Sports Carnage Podcast is probably episode 86 or 87, whichever one is, the higher number. That's the one we're at. But we previewed this game. We previewed the Michigan game. Obviously, this game, you can just skip past that part because it doesn't matter what we said, because, we were all wrong. Nobody thought Rutgers would at least win. There were a couple that thought they would cover. And obviously, they absolutely did. Smack Michigan State silly. But if you're still looking for a primer for that Michigan-Minnesota game, we also talked about that, so you can just go straight to that part. But that is what we have for you, and then make sure, follow Twitter, Facebook too. But if you guys just follow our Facebook link here in this description, you can find all of our other pages. And then our final comment here is William says that Michigan will beat MSU 38-17. Give him a shout out. I will. I think, again, William, you're being very kind to that Michigan State score there. Yeah, I think it would probably be like a 52-20 ball game. Michigan is way better than Rutgers was, and even if we don't turn it over 7 times, I don't know that we have some of the offensive success that we had against Rutgers. Like, Rocky Lombardi is not going to throw the ball for 320 yards against Michigan. Now, we might end up running the ball for whatever we ran it for here. 60 total rushing yards. I can see that happening against Michigan maybe. But absolutely not 320 passing yards. Probably just about half that if I would have to guess. And again, Michigan should be able to do some stuff to our secondary that Rutgers really couldn't. So that's what I think about this game, and kind of obviously a primer to what we think about next game. Although I'm sure we'll touch on it on our next podcast a little bit. But that's all we have for you guys. Thank you so much for staying with me, for any of you that you did, or if you tuned in for 2 seconds, I appreciate it as well. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube after, you can find all of our links and stuff in the description below. And that is all we have. Thank you.